Welcome to Facing the Canon. My guest on the programme is Paul Kerensa, comedy writer and comedian. Paul, welcome to Facing the Canon.
Thank you for having me. Delight to be here.
I'm going to start with an unusual question.
Okay.
And it may seem intrusive, but I know that you've actually said this from stage.
Okay.
You don't have a belly button.
That is true. That is an unusual. I can't imagine you've started many interviews with that question.
No. And there can't be many people without a belly button. What's the story behind you not having a belly button?
Well, Adam didn't need one, so we're going back to the beginning in a way. No, I was born. I did have one for about a day, and I like to add this air of mystique in a way, and make people ask the question: are you a clone? I had someone say you must be a test tube baby. That's not how test tube babies are born. But I was born rather difficultly with my my bladder, in fact, on the outside, and which meant that they didn't know it was going to happen as a surprise. So they had to rush me to Great Ormond Street Hospital. I spent a lot of time in there as a child, but it did mean that within a day, they needed to pop it back in, obviously. Looks better that way, and zip it up, so no navel. Yeah. So oddly, my navellessness is the acceptable face, the easy way into this unusual medical quirk.
What's the medical term for the condition that you had?
It's called extrophy, which oddly then is, I guess it's Greek of extrophy, out of body. So people think of out of body experiences. They never think of the bladder, do they? But
no.
But that was my story. That was my way into to life.
But you had lots of operations.
I think it was 99 before I was 5. 99 operations.
99 operations.
I believe so, yeah. So I think nowadays they do it with 3 operations. But back in my day, they wanted to give you the full 100, you know. So, but there aren't many of us. It's about 1 in 100,000 births, I think it is. And yeah, there were a few of us about. But oddly, when I was in Great Ormond Street as a child, they did a survey of children and then adults with the same condition. Not many of us. And they asked what we do as jobs. And obviously, I'm a comedian. And about a third of people with the same condition went into healthcare. A third went into entertainment in some way, which is a hugely high amount, and a third did other jobs. But I think if you're in a children's hospital growing up with a condition like this, you just want to cheer people up, I suppose.
That is quite an amazing statistic, isn't it? That 33% went into entertainment.
Yeah.
So all is well now?
Well enough. I go back for annual checkups and things like that. But yeah, I think the main crux of it was in the early years as a child. When I did have several times when it was a little bit 50-50 whether or not I would make it through operations and things like that. But I feel that was then. But also maybe that started to bring into focus some of those big life and death questions quite young as a child, really. So I think that's part of my faith journey as well. Yeah.
So how did you navigate that season of life, you know, as you're growing up and teenage years? Was that awkward?
It was, I think it's fair to say, partly because this condition as well, that because they're doing lots of surgery around the bladder and that sort of area, I was told that it would be highly unlikely I'd have children. And I was told this when I was a child myself, which is unusual. I think most people find out if they can have kids or not when they are trying.
Can you remember how you reacted or thought at that time?
I think baffled. I probably didn't even know how you have children when I was told I couldn't have them. I didn't quite know what that even fully meant. But it did mean that I really felt, I think, as a teenager and as a young adult, that I felt I was on a path in life that maybe I wasn't destined for, because I'm married now. I have 2 children.
And you have 2 children.
Yeah, and I was told it was just unlikely, and the doctors were a little baffled. Like, okay, well, it's possible, it's just unlikely. But it kind of goes to show, I think, that you sometimes think you know the path you're on, but God sometimes has different plans, really.
Sure. Now, you are a comedian. We will talk about that. You often talk about this in your shows. And what prompted you to be very open and real about this personal condition?
Yeah, I think I resisted it for quite some time. And I think my early years as a stand-up, I was just doing general jokes about all sorts of things that didn't really link to my personal life at all. I certainly didn't talk about my faith to begin with as well. I couldn't find anything that funny about it. I didn't want to mock it. So I would maybe mock that I'm a bit nerdy, or I'm from Cornwall, or I've got glasses, or these different things. But I think it was that thing within about 5 or 6 years of doing stand-up, realising that sometimes you have to use whatever's unique to you. And I could see other comedians and performers doing this, that they would look at their life experiences or just things that made them the only person who would have that story. And I thought, well, I don't know many other comedians without a belly button, so let's go down there. I mean, I've since found there are 3, but at the time I thought I was the only one. So there you go.
There you go. Now, what about, Paul, your faith journey? What was that like growing up?
Well, yeah, I wasn't really necessarily in a Christian home, although my parents were part of village life was important to them. I was born in Cornwall, then moved to Surrey, and it was the church was the hub of the village. So it was a sense of my brother and myself going to Scouts and Pathfinders youth group and the choir. I was head chorister, but we wouldn't really go along to church unless it was me singing in that choir or doing something like that. So I think came from me as a teenager, actually going, those other things I'm going along to, I think that makes sense to me. And I think that as a philosophy, as a theology, I think it took a while to connect the dots on that one. But in that sense, I don't feel it came from my parents really, apart from the fact they were sending me off to church for different things in the course of the week,
So when would you say that you encountered Jesus?
I think definitively for me, I would say it was a canal side in Birmingham on one of those Pathfinders, kind of lots of 40 young teenagers together. And I think it was year 3 or something. I'd done that particular canal trip 1 week every summer. And it was just a case of puzzling out. And so one year it would be a sense of who were the disciples. That was their theme. Or another year it was the miracles or Jesus' life. Or it was like doing one of these courses, but very gradually, 1 week a year. And I think it was about year 3. I thought, I think this makes sense to me. And I believe that Jesus exists. And Jesus, if this is the way things are, let's do this. Let's live this life. And I, on that canal side, surrounded by friends with a setting sun over the fields and industrial Birmingham behind me, that was the moment, I feel.
That it crystallised.
It just made sense in that moment, and I feel that was a moment of commitment. Yeah, certainly.
So where does all the comedy fit in? I mean, you're a comedy writer, you are a comedian. What's the story behind that? Yeah,
so I think at that sort of time, when I became a Christian, I would, as I say, be part of that church. And actually, it's only more recent years, I've really credited, I think, 1 or 2 people within that church for giving me a chance, really. I think they saw something that I liked, fun and making fun and creating and writing. And so they would get me to write those dramas for church services. Can you retell the story of the Good Samaritan in a funny sketch?
And you were a teenager?
I was 16, 17 years old and having fun writing those, or a Christmas nativity sketch and things like that. And so then I went to university. I did theology as a degree, but I found drama there as well, the amateur dramatic sort of club, and got a chance to write fuller plays and then send jokes off to radio shows. At the time, my first credit was the news headlines on Radio 2 with Roy Hudd. And that led then to writing other sketch shows for Radio 4, the Now Show, the News Quiz, Dead Ringers, and then meeting Lee Mack, moving to television when he did the Lee Mack sitcom Not Going Out, meeting Miranda Hart, writing for her. So it's all just been the right place, the right people, the right time, the right moment. And I sometimes say it that Lee Mack, I remember the moment that I was working on a different show at the BBC, the lift doors open, and Lee Mack walks out and jokingly, because Lee is always joking, he said, "I have a sketch show, where are the writers?" And I just said, "I'll do it." And my writing partner at the time was in the toilet, so he didn't get the job, and I did. So it goes to show, hold it in, because you never know which opportunity might there.
Absolutely. So you've got to kind of say, divine appointments on many, many occasions.
Totally. It's coincidences, it's God incidences, it's those moments where you just don't know. And, I've heard it said in the past, was it some philosopher said about opportunity being where preparation and luck meet? But as a Christian, of course,
Christian,
you throw God into that mix as well.
Of course.
But you sometimes have to try and make those opportunities for yourself and then hand it over. And if it's right, maybe it happens. If it's not right, maybe it doesn't. And you see from there.
Well, Miranda, one of my favourite series, fantastic. So just tell us a little bit more, I'm curious. How does that work for you as a writer?
Yeah, so with that one, there were about 4 or 5 of us as writers on that show, and a lot of Christians involved. I think 3 of the writers were Christians. I think one of the producer was a Christian. The cast, various Christians in that as well.
Do you sit around a table?
Well, in that one, Miranda and another writer would often sort of work out the bare bones of the story, and she would have an idea of maybe a couple of funny scenarios. Another writer then would come in and work out, okay, what if we saw this plot through then to make those funny moments happen? And the version I then often got sent was a bare bones version of that with gaps in. So it would often have a whole scene where it would just say, in this scene, Miranda walks in and the mum comes in and this happens and those things happen. Make that happen. So I would then get to work on that particular
and make that
scene.
happen as funny as possible.
As funny as possible. So often you end up with almost a soap opera version of the script to begin with, where there might be hints of humour, there might be some funny things in it. Hopefully the plot sounds funny as well, and you can see this sense of chaos being resolved. Because I do see sitcoms as a sort of almost mini parables in a way. That often if someone who's a bit lofty is humbled, and someone who's just needs a bit of comeuppance, that moment happens and we have a sense of resolution. So all of that shape is then there, and then we come in and just keep adding funny where possible.
Yeah, and that could take a long time. Or you might be inspired and get an idea, or it could be hours and hours.
Totally. And I've worked on both those sorts of shows. The ones round the table, the American model where you have a dozen writers and donuts and you're just trying to get in a quick moment the funniest line and you move on. But I've also worked more often on those shows where we don't meet up. There's no donut budget. You're doing it from home. 2 o'clock in the morning, you get that idea, you write it down, and you send it in remotely. So in that sense, that moment, you have longer to think about it. And I quite like that percolating time. Yeah.
Obviously, you see the funny side of things, as I often do. You've always been like that?
I think so. I think it does go back to the hospital days. I think that moment where you just try and find the joy in things. I think that I have always felt that. I remember distinctly a moment where a family friend, a neighbour, friend of my parents, I remembered I must have been about 12, 13 years old, and she was over for a cup of tea, and I just said something, and I remember distinctly the sound of her laughter, that she laughed in a way that I thought, I've just made an adult laugh. Not in a there funny way, but I thought, I like that. I like the fact that I've actually added some mirth and joy to that person's day. And I thought, I want to keep doing that, please. So it's something I think that comedians probably, unfortunately, you keep trying to chase that moment of, can you get that spark again?
And it's very therapeutic, isn't it, to laugh? And I think many of us, it's cathartic. And you feel good when you laugh, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I think and you laugh. I mean, when I do comedy shows, stand-up shows, live shows, you gather together a couple of hundred people sometimes. You laugh together. That's lovely as well. That's a really nice feeling to actually, that sort of laughing en masse thing is just gorgeous, as well as writing for a show where people are just enjoying it at home, So there's the 2 different sides of things, but I think you have to somehow see life with that spirit of joy. I think that does feel, for me, like what we're here for.
Sometimes we ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a comedian. When did you think, actually, that's what I want to be?
Yeah, I don't know. I remember distinctly, I went off to do theology as a degree, and it wasn't a vocational theology course. I remember distinctly, our New Testament lecturer was not a Christian and told us all, any Christians amongst you, I'm going to make sure you're not by the end of the course. And we survived that, it was okay. But I remember doing that, going, I still don't know what I want to do yet in life. And I was doing theology because I was interested in it, and I thought, well, let's use that as a starting point. and then found theatre and drama a bit more as I was doing that there. So I think it was very gradual. I do remember saying to my parents, when I was doing theology, they thought, is he going to become a vicar? Oh, I'm not sure about that. And then I left and went to drama school for a year, and they went, oh, no, please be a vicar, because you might get a house then, drama school, don't be an actor. I left drama school, couldn't act. And I said, I think I'll be a comedian. They went, oh, please be an actor, a vicar, anything but comedian, So I think there was a sense of a drip feed as to what job I may end up doing. And even now, I still don't. I'm 46. I don't know if I'm a comedian, a writer, a broadcaster. I don't know. I do a bit of everything, and I enjoy that way.
So when we say stand-up comedy, tell us a bit. What kind of situations do you do that?
Yeah, so I kind of do the two sides. I do the stand-up comedy circuit in pubs and clubs where there are maybe 3 or 4 acts on. You do 20 minutes each. And that could be a purpose-built comedy club or a function.
And is that quite hard?
That can be quite hard. I mean, the nice thing is, in a way, that the room is set up for it, and a good compere and a good comedy promoter will make sure there's a spirit of laughter in the room already.
And do you know when you're going well, and do you know when you're not going well?
Definitely. The thing is, the audience will let you know that. If you're not sure, listen very carefully, and there will be a clue. And you have to expect both. You have to expect, even years on.
So if after 5 minutes you know you're not going down well, but you've still got 15 minutes to go, what do you do? You get your best stuff out.
You get your best stuff out. The danger is if you've already done your best stuff and then you're working out what to do. Sometimes I've done that thing where you then go, I'm going to do my closer now, and then you go, oh no, that didn't work either. Well, I haven't got a closer now. What do I do? So that can be problematic. But I think that the thing I had to teach myself was not to rush. And I think there's a lot of panic that people have when it's not going well. You speed up, you gabble to get through it. And I had to learn that actually that's the time you need to slow right down, so they slowly come in and listen to you a bit more. But that goes against those instincts that we have of just wanting to get through it, So the nice thing is, after a while, you end up having all sorts of gigs. You have the good ones, the bad ones, the ones in between, and trying to work out how to write each of those.
And you go to churches.
I go to churches. So about half of my shows are for churches. And they're lovely. They're there's again a sense of joy at those.
They're receptive.
Receptive, yeah.
And what kind of humour would you be using in that environment?
Well, I think, but the first few I did years ago now, I feel that I didn't land it properly because I was just doing the things I did in the comedy clubs straight away in a church. And I now feel that I need to take my time at those shows, a little more at church events, when people aren't necessarily all there for the comedy. Some people are there because it's a thing the church is putting on. And also, if they've invited a non-Christian friend often, then the church people are worried about what the unchurched people will think, and the unchurched people are worried, what have I been dragged to here? So you have to, in a way, get that out the way. You have to just state that up front and go, it's going to be okay, we're going to have a nice time, and maybe name some of those issues that people might be thinking about already. And then you can have a lovely time. Then they can be really, really just the warmest atmospheres.
And do you sometimes, explain or reveal the kind of humour of so much that we do in church? Whether it's bad coffee, bad biscuits, just bad. Do you sometimes do that?
It's absolutely. And I think the thing is that I suppose I try and get across. And one of my I think we always come back to sometimes the same thoughts, philosophies, sermons. You listen to someone doing the same sermon a few times. And one of the things for me is that we're all, Christians at least, we know we're a bit rubbish. And I think sometimes society can think Christians are holier than thou, or we think so much of ourselves. And you see the disciples maybe on a stained glass window, all looking very lofty. But actually, when you read the Gospels, you realise they were doubters, deniers, betrayers, getting things wrong. The fact that Peter, sort of leading and the first pope, so they say, but actually getting things wrong all the time. Denying Jesus 3 times, although he never said Simon says. So Simon Peter made a good point of that. But we get things wrong, and so often it does feel like the disciples are there, sometimes in these stories, representing the fact that we all get things wrong. And Jesus will say a thing and they'll go, did you mean that? And he goes, no, I didn't quite mean that, And we're all a bit fallible. So I think sometimes pointing out our fallibilities is valid,
Yes.
So,
and it's being honest.
It is. It is big, and there's an honesty to being a stand-up. I think I've done a few church events where you walk in and you just name the fact that this church looks a bit like an aircraft hangar, or an IKEA store, and sometimes the minister's going, "Yeah, it does, doesn't it? We hadn't clocked that," So it's nice, and there's a release in the laughter that we're all on the same page and we're all human trying to get along.
Comedians like Michael McIntyre, very interesting, Paul. It's all observational humour, isn't it? That's how do you, for example, the dishwasher? How do you fill it? And he could do 20 minutes on that.
Totally. It's a real skill, yeah.
It is a skill, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And someone like a Michael McIntyre who really just nails that thing that you do, but you hadn't noticed that you do, or things like that. I think there's a real skill in that actually, and not every comedian can do it. He does it, I think, better than pretty much anyone. Just really naming those moments. I bumped into someone yesterday who asked, "Oh, how are you?" And the first thing I meant to say, "Not bad," or "I'm well," and I mixed the two together and said, "I'm not well." Yes. And then she started asking why I'm not well. I thought, "Oh no, this is this has gone terribly wrong," And those little moments, those quirks of life where we muck up and we get things a bit wrong. And I think a really good observational comedian can just label it and go, "Look, we all do this, don't we?" And we think, "Yes, I do do that," And I think there's a Christian model in that as well, because Jesus as God, but also as man, living that life and walking that walk with us. And I think the way that Jesus' stories are about carpentry and, the speck of sawdust and the plank.
Yes.
And, he's a carpenter using carpentry language and sowing the parable of the sower. He's speaking to people who are working the fields, and he knows how to speak their language and tell those stories and get across to their lives by actually speaking into their lives like that. And I think that is a very human but God-blessed thing.
Yeah, there is a lot of humour in the Bible, isn't there, Paul? And I think we don't often understand it because a lot of it is Hebrew humour, and a lot of Hebrew humour is humour by exaggeration.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the example I just gave of the plank in the eye is exaggeration. And we may not laugh out loud at it nowadays, but then I kind of think, humour changes, senses of humour change so quickly. So we don't laugh at a Shakespeare comedy. We don't laugh at necessarily out loud at maybe P.G. Wodehouse or something from 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or even, Little Britain are now apologising about sketches they did 10 years ago because tastes of humour have changed. So we're not going to laugh at a thing that's 2,000 years ago in a different language. But there's definite humour there, certainly. It's human. Human and humour, I think, go hand in hand.
But you're so right, Paul. We have to filter things out, don't we? And we probably aren't always aware of what we're absorbing from the world. And, we sometimes allow the world to kind of mould us, don't we? But actually thinking, no, that wasn't a good thing to say. Yeah. And you want to lift people up.
Yeah, I think I fell into that trap, I'm sure, early on. I think many comedians, many performers of different types do. It takes a real boldness, I think, to start off in a entertainment genre, for example, or any walk of life, and march a different way early on. And I think I certainly fell foul of looking what other comedians were doing and go, "Oh yeah, okay, I should do that. I should mock that celebrity, or I should pick on that thing." And actually, it took me a little while to realise, no, that's not a good way. There's a better way, I think.
What's your aspirations for the future?
Well, my aspirations for the future are manifold, I'm sure. I'd like to write more. I like writing books. I'd like to write more. I'm doing a research project at the minute in the origins of broadcasting in the BBC, and finding a lot of interest and joy in finding, especially in religious broadcasting, some of the pioneers who actually were the first ones to amplify, to broadcast blessings beyond the room they're in. And I found a few characters and people that have been ignored from the history books, but actually a preacher in Peckham, for example, who was the very first person to actually broadcast in Britain, a religious broadcast. And Dr. Boone was his name, and he's never been written about, but I found his sermon, he wrote it, he put it in the British Library, and we recreated it last year in his church. And that felt like a really nice moment to just mark this person.
Marvellous.
Who started the thing we're doing now. So
yes.
The legacy is there,
two of your recent children's books, which are excellent. Can you tell us about those?
Oh, bless you. Well, these are, Fantastically Faithful Heroes and Fantastically Faithful World Changers Who Gave Their All for God. They were a joy to do, really. I like writing. I've got children myself, 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and my daughter particularly loves stories about real people. And I just love delving into these lives of real Christians, some quite famous. We've got a Martin Luther King and a Rosa Parks, but some less famous, a Pandita Ramabai and Wangari Maathai, people who were doing great things. But what I found interesting as well was being able to look at all of these lives. We have 8 characters per book, real life people, and looking at the comparisons and what they have in common. And I found to be quite inspired personally by the fact that I think all of them really, they didn't set out necessarily to change the world, but actually just to help the people where they were. And I feel that was a really nice starting point for us all, really, and that's all you can do.
And it's interesting that adults say to children, grow up. But Jesus told adults, unless you become like little children. And sometimes we need to become like little children, don't we?
Definitely. And that curiosity, I think I've rediscovered that curiosity to learn about the world and to be almost back to school again. And I see that, I'm living that a little bit through my children now, and I really hope that I don't forget that when they've left school, because they come home with homework and we puzzle it out together. My wife helps with one subject, I'm helping with another, and we're relearning things and rediscovering that sense of curiosity. So I long for that continual curiosity about God's creation.
Well, Paul, keep writing. Pray more success upon you and keep performing. Thank you for joining us on Facing the Canon.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Paul. How wonderful to have people like Paul who are comedians, clean comedians, communicating both to the church and to the unchurched. Thank you for joining us on Facing the Canon. Please join us again.
For the Son of Man came to
For the Son of Man came to
For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.
For the Son of Man
came to seek and save the lost.
Jesus said, I will build my church, and, same sentence, and, same verse, the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
In the midst of a storm, we don't need you in the fetal position panicking. We need you to go into your prayer closet and get a word from God.
People that walked away and go, this is not for me, they're coming home. And Jesus doesn't go, I told you so. He welcomes us with open arms because he's the God of new beginning.